Welcome to Catholic Homeschool Radio, where we begin conversations to help parents enrich their lives and make practical decisions for the future.
Welcome, friends, to Catholic Homeschool Radio. Priscilla McCaffrey here to have a conversation with the irrepressible Kathleen Sullivan. I know she would call herself a career homemaker, and to irritate the feminists further, she would probably say she was in partnership with her husband for 63 years. They raised 6 children. She is a pro-life advocate. She's lobbied before the Catholic Bishops of America. She's lobbied before the state and federal legislators. Her concerns have always been the family, the sanctity of human life, and freedom of religion. She ran for U.S. Congress in a tough district outside Chicago. That was back in 1990 and 92. And while she didn't win, bless her for making a lot of people choke on their morning coffee. I'm sure they were not full of glee to see your name out there. She was probably the closest friend and confidant of Eagle Forum founder Phyllis Schlafly, who died in 2016 on the Feast of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And those two Catholic women, I think, were the foremost champions of human life in the 20th century. Some years ago, Kathleen did a head fake and left Chicago, went to Florida as if to retire, but she got all the more involved in bringing abstinence programs very successfully to public schools in Florida. She is also the mother of a friend of mine and grandmother to a great bunch of Murphys that my children know and love, and they are a lot of fun and full of the love of life. Kathleen, welcome.
Thank you very much. This is a real treat for me to have this opportunity because if there's one thing Phyllis really insisted and taught all of us that worked with her was to get out there and really share what you're doing and how to do it so that others will get interested, enthused, and be able to carry on.
And maybe figure out a way to do it themselves because, for a lot of us, it seems intimidating.
Yes, and it is intimidating unless really you look at it as an opportunity to be creative. Mm-hmm. And once you get started in it, one of the hardest things we had with working with Phyllis and Eagle Forum was getting them to stick in there over a period of time and a long period of time, mm-hmm. rather than floating in and out on a particular issue of the moment and then disappear because the next issue that came up, you had to start all over again. Mm-hmm. And she was extremely talented in getting that message across and getting a lot of us to really be active on an ongoing basis. And in my case, it was over 54 years.
So you met Phyllis in 57 or 62?
61.
61, okay. Well, we're going to go back a little bit. And also, I'd like to share with all of you that Kathleen has this great smile on a wise face. And she looks like someone always sizing things up, but always ready to jump into the fray. And she's still doing that in her 9th decade. That must be her Irish heritage. You also get the feeling that she will have some fun while she's at it. So, Kathleen, while you've dealt with some of the most disturbing issues that have challenged our country, you always seem to be having a good time. And I look at some of the feminists, I look at Nancy Pelosi or Rachel Maddow, and I don't think the poor things have really had a good day in decades. And in fact, the face of feminism, to my mind, has always been unappealing. Why do you look like you are still enjoying the battle?
Well, that's an interesting challenge, and I have had it before. In fact, long ago, a newspaper, suburban Chicago newspaper reporter was interviewing me, and he said, in view of all these terrible things happening in the church, the feminists were really taking off within our church at that time, how can you keep being upbeat? How can you keep going? And I looked at him and I said, well, God didn't promise that the church would last here in America, but he did promise that it would last forever. So it'll be going someplace. And he just went blank and thought, oh, wait a minute. You mean you're thinking beyond America? I said, of course we do, because we are the leader, the best country in the world, and we have an obligation to keep being the leader as long as we are true to what nature and God's laws are. So looking at it that way, you're really working for a higher power. And it's very satisfying.
I think, that's key. I also think, and this is something I've told my children, you get into a battle because it's the right thing to do. It's the right cause. And even if you see ahead you're going to lose that battle, possibly, you have brought people along. And this is the way I look at what Phyllis did with Eagle Forum. She, in many ways, all the things that we would have lost through ERA, we have lost, through judicial activism and all sorts of other things. But nevertheless, she educated a lot of people who got into the battle, who became, I think, not just better citizens, but better men and women, better Christians. And that's finally what it's all about. You bring people along, you introduce them to the truth.
Yes, and in many cases, a lot of those people realized how right she was in taking on that battle, so that in losing, you can learn a lot, and the main thing is you learn how to recognize when something like that comes up again in future years. It's the old saying of history repeats itself. And the reason we've got into so much trouble is history books don't necessarily cover what needs repeating.
No, that's true.
And in Phyllis's case, she would be out there leading and explaining and showing why it is important to really uphold important things. And even though, in fact, there were very few things we lost. And even in this ERA fight, I think eventually all the items will be peeled back.
I hope so. But
the women in combat, for instance, the whole gay rights, nature's going to reverse itself.
I hope so. So you're an indomitable optimist.
Yes, yes, I am.
And I think that's a good thing to be in this battle. So I want to talk a little bit about your younger life, not so much the issues in this program, but what life was like before the revolution. And you know what I mean by the revolution. I think we mean the same thing.
Yeah, but I don't quite I'm not sure revolution is the appropriate word. It was more of a very stealth takeover. Revolution sounds like it was a great big upheaval and warlike to me. And
I would say it's a revolution it's an inverted revolution. It was from the top down. It was not the masses rising up against the injustice of women and
right.
So so we're talking about the same thing, but we have a different word.
The philosophy that came down through the churches, through the communist revolution, and started influencing our country, was much wider than we recognized at the time, probably because it turns out it was very, very broad within our Catholic Church. And some other churches too, but very definitely within the Catholic Church. And that has come to light now, and I think the spotlight of truth needs to be really paid attention to, because it's still there and on a broader scale than we realized. Therefore, the cure for that is really for the laity to become better informed, better organized, and take our church back. And that is happening. That's beginning to emerge, and all we need is a few more very, very good, strong leaders to lead that laity. And unfortunately, our hierarchical structure in America has become too dependent on government contracts.
Oh, yes.
And our tax dollars are going to get them to go along with what the government programs want done. Therefore, the emphasis is more on pay attention to immigration, pay attention to social welfare.
Instead of paying attention to the implosion of the church and the emptying of the pews.
And the abortion question.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible that we have a record of 60 million abortions in this country at this point in time. And we're going to put an end to that. I am very hopeful it'll happen in 2 to 3 years.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, well, so what you mean is we're going to see it start to go down, but it has been going down. It's gone down.
Where we'll get protection with legislation against abortion.
Okay. And that will happen. I think you're right. That will happen more and more as people grasp that states should be determining these things and not be
I think
subjected to the diktat from
the
federal government.
Two aspects that have to be covered. One, we need to revisit Roe v. Wade and throw it out, because science has now proved that they can tell when life begins.
Yes.
And the decision in 73 said that should science ever prove when life begins, this could be revisited. So we need to revisit that and show that spark of life that is now recorded in the marvelous technology we have. That needs to be brought to the attention of the general public. Most people don't quite know it yet. But that research is going to come out, and I think that will move fast. There should be massive class action suit again by people who went along because they were fooled. They did not know the truth.
So you think women who had abortions will enter into a class action suit against the purveyors of abortion? Well, that's an interesting concept.
I'll tell you an example. I had lunch just a month ago with some people from Illinois visiting down here. And a mutual friend of theirs, I didn't know them before, wanted me to meet them. They were down staying with her. And we were talking mainly about another special work of mine, which is the abstinence education, and then got into the fact of revisiting Roe v. Wade. And I explained to them that my analysis of the 60 million abortions meant that there were 60 million mothers, fathers, grandparents directly connected with that
whole families have been
horrific.
Hurt.
Yes, and it seems that the only way they can live with it is we don't talk about it. We just don't address it.
There's a lot of repression.
And to my great surprise, the 3 of them leaned forward, and the first one said, "You're right. I like your creative thinking. I had an abortion, and I'm spending the rest of my life trying to make up for it. I work at a pregnancy counseling center." The second one said, "I had 4 abortions, and I've never had any children. And man, do I regret it."
How old were these women?
They were in their 60s. One was 50-something, 60 and 70.
So it's my generation that started hearing it when they were freshmen in high school.
Yes. The third one said, "I've had 2." And all 3 of them said, "When are you going to get this class action suit going? Count me in." They're ready to go.
Oh, okay.
They are looking for a vehicle to try and have their voices heard.
Okay, then who would they
revisit it?
Who would they operate? Who would this be directed to? I guess Planned Parenthood, or
no, to the courts to get
you
a
can
legal
sue the
group.
courts?
No. you get lawyers
Yeah.
to represent these people who were misled, who are part of the class action, get lawyers to represent them, and start the process through the courts. But we'll make sure we get a fair judicial person rather than some of them we have there now that we know are quite biased, and take it up the line, appellate court and the Supreme Court.
Right.
But the timing is right to redo that. Now, aside from revisiting Roe v. Wade, we also need a movement to have an amendment for our U.S. Constitution, not calling a con by any means.
Right.
I'm very much opposed to calling a con, but a regular movement for adding an amendment to protect life from the moment of conception to natural death.
Yeah, that would be stunning.
A right to life, and that would cover all the states immediately. Revisiting Roe v. Wade would only, it would get rid of the decision of 73, but it would revert back to what was being practiced then, where we had abortion in New York and California, and I think one or two other states. That's not necessarily the best way to cure it, because then you've got to fight it state by state. So it's a very interesting.
Do we need a powerhouse to get us to move us along in that direction, or
we need quite a few powerhouses
on a couple of different levels?
And my recommendation is going to be that we get Republican National Coalition for Life, which is the organization Phyllis founded within the Republican Party, to take it on. And it will be it is a unit within the Republican National Party. And if we took it on and developed it in many states, primarily in states where we have good support, but also in states where there's strong opposition, it'd be a good way to develop campaign organizations to depose some of the Senate or congressional elected people who have no respect for the sanctity of human life. I mean, it is appalling.
Yeah, it is. Of course, the media is. That's
well,
the
fortunately, the media has been dealt a very, very strong rebuke. They're still slugging away.
I know. I hear you, and it's all been rich. But
social media, the websites, and the communications today way outnumber them.
Okay, so you're getting into this. You're trying to be hopeful here.
Oh,
you're
yes.
trying to make me hopeful. Okay, that's. But we'll talk a little bit about those signs of hope, because we were talking about it before we started in on this, and you were saying that the young people, you have a lot of hope in them because they're what are they seeing?
Well, you know, the interesting, there's some fascinating things that are developing. Our educational programs really stress the emotional effects of young people growing up.
Okay, I'm going to just interject. Those are very well thought out abstinence programs that are in several counties in Florida. There are workbooks. Teachers use them and like them, I understand, because they see the depressed kids in front of them. And they know that they're involved in things that they shouldn't be. So they're happy to be talking about abstinence and having a sense of your own dignity. That's all right. So then you have some data on the success of this program. So you want to just
yes, we have one main county, Collier County, which is where I live in Southwest Florida. Our books are taught in 17 middle schools and 9 at all 3 grades, 6th, 7th, and 8th middle school, and 9th grade in 9 high schools. And
all public high schools.
All public high schools. Having this taught to the kids in a discussion manner. The books are very, very magnetic to the students. They write in almost every page. They use it as a journal. The teachers tell us it creates a tremendous discussion among the kids. And they emphasize that emotional development. And, for instance, at those young ages, the girls are much more mature. The ones that do have physical relationships, the relationships are usually broken off by the girl, who's older, more mature at that point, and they move on to older guys. The young guys of 13, 14, 15 are really emotionally damaged to a great degree. And we didn't recognize
that's something we don't
that.
talk about. We're usually talking about damages, STDs, or unwanted pregnancies.
Right. That's there too, but that emotional factor is really what causes the trauma in that developing age group.
And how are you able to ascertain that? Do you have psychologists coming in, or just
teachers
the feedback
report
from
it.
the kids?
Yes.
Okay.
And for instance, some of the things a teacher said, this kid came back and said, I found out my parents were really a lot more sharp and involved and knowledgeable than I realized, because we encourage them to take the books home and discuss it with mom and dad. On the other hand, you get some, this happened in a school in Chicago, 5 or 6 kids in the class said, ain't going to work. It's just not going to work. Nope, it's just not going to work. And the rest of the class started saying, oh, be quiet, Listen to what's being said.
Right.
So the peer debate developed in the classroom.
Right.
Turns out afterwards, the teacher brought out to us that the kids who were saying it ain't going to work, one in particular there were 5 children in that school, same mother, but 4 different fathers. So in their sphere,
that's their experience.
But the peer discussion helps that child.
Right. So they begin to see what's the norm. What they think is the norm is not necessarily the norm.
Exactly.
And then there's the next question, whether or not this is okay. It might be more common in my experience, but is it a good thing? And that is a value judgment that I hope you're liberated to talk about in your programs.
Oh yeah, it's really common sense.
Yeah.
Let me give you another one that came up recently this semester. 9th grade. A boy says, well, I tell you why I'm not going to get involved. My father has 3 different child support payments to pay. 3 different women.
Oh, yeah.
He says, I'm not going to get trapped in that.
Well, it's a sad lesson to learn.
Yes, but it's an unusual thing for a 9th grade boy to be aware of this and have him realize the risk is not worth it.
Right.
The consequences are so serious, where we just have them discuss the consequences, and they know it. They recognize it in their own peers, in their culture, and the kids will come and bring it up in class. I asked my mom, did you ever have an abortion? Because how come I don't have any siblings?
Oh.
Now, that's a pretty incredible thing to have the children bringing up. They're beginning to realize.
To make the parents accountable.
Yes. And in many cases, I think the parents, the ones we talked about before that might have had the abortions, they don't want their children to repeat it.
Of course not.
They want to get it out there, and
shame.
They want to get it over with and stop. This movement has gone too far, not to get into the economics of it. Think of how much could be cut out of the Medicaid budget of kids' programs if we didn't have to spend hundreds of millions on what we call pick up the pieces after the problem happened programs. Keep them healthy in the first place.
Well, I think it really is our side that has this sense of the human being, fallen, but it has a certain dignity, and they deserve to know that it isn't that hard. It isn't impossible, and in fact, it's a very good choice to live with a sense of what you're about, and
yes,
but to prepare yourself always for the big fail is what Planned Parenthood and that culture is all about. We have to be ready for the big fail.
Right. And the idea of expecting your neighbor, a fellow taxpayer, to subsidize it for you, that's going to stop.
Right. Well, they would say, well, would you rather support the unwanted child, or the contraception? So, that argument.
No, now we say we have a much better alternative. We have the real prevention.
Yes.
Take a look at these books and take a look at the results.
Right.
When a program can cut 52% of teen unwed births in a county in 6 years, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And I do find it alarming how many young people are on antidepressants.
That's right.
I live in a town that's, I guess, fairly affluent. And every time I turn around, somebody's talking about their young friend who's on antidepressants. They have everything they could want in the world. They have a lot of security, financial.
But they're not happy. And I don't know why. I can't see the teachers of my town embracing your program, but maybe there are a few who would do that. And I haven't investigated that kind of thing. You might find it's a lot more receptive than you might expect, because of the fact that any teacher, we dealt with 119, I think it was, teachers in Collier County throughout the Collier school system teaching in those grades. And they love it. In fact, we have been invited to come to the statewide presentation in September. For the whole state of Florida.
So all those...
To give a presentation for all the states. Now, the key thing in getting it in there is we donate the books directly to the teachers.
I see. Okay.
We do not ask them to put it in their budget or don't have to go to the school board. We just approach the teachers. Would you like to have these? And how many do you want if you like them? So the teachers have become the referral point, and some of them talk to people in neighboring counties, and now we're going through 5 other counties now we're dealing with.
How are you able to supply the books?
Private donations. Private donations.
Do you have a website that we can, we'll plug? Let's
CCAP, Collier Community Abstinence Program, and yes.
I'll write that down for our introduction so that people can get in touch with you. Not, of course, this is Collier County, but they'll find you through this, and then...
Yes, and we are in the process of debating, should we get another name like YCAP, which would be your community, applicable anywhere. Yeah. But the fact that this pilot test was done so successfully...
It's done.
Identifying it.
The hardest part's been done.
Yes. So the Collier CCAP name is unique in that it represents a winning program. And can you give me 2 stats that show it's a winning program? You've got feedback from the teachers. The teachers love it. Lots of responses from the kids. But there's some data in that brochure. Abortions are down. Or births. Births among 15 to 19-year-olds dropped 50%.
Over what period of time?
6 years.
And is that only of the counties that you're in?
This one county, yes.
Oh, my.
This one county had a 50% less teen births, unwed teen births.
Okay.
Now, in case someone might think, well, could that be more abortions and better birth control doing it? Guess what? The STD rates also plummeted tremendously.
Okay.
And that's all spelled out in our brochure here, which is very that really does get the attention of the policymakers because you know you've got healthier kids.
Yes.
Think of what
And they're
the
actually
insurance-
interested in that. Unfortunately, up in my town, we're now talking about the trans problems, and so
We know there's really a very, very good answer to that. Sexual intimacy, physical intimacy among teenagers has dire consequences, short-term and long-term, regardless of the sex of your partner.
yeah, and as a result, we have a lot of dysphoria.
Yes.
This is
There's
something,
your emotional trauma.
This is that's certainly true. And one thing that I want to do, we're already at the half-hour mark of our first discussion, and I know we could go on for a long time.
I got you sidetracked.
No, I know, but it's so interesting. I can't help but it's back to my initial question about what was it like, before the revolution. I want people to understand. I want these young people to understand. You and I never heard of a person who wanted to cut off body parts, who was not a damaged person.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
There was a happy culture. There was it was a more sunshiny culture. And it wasn't, we didn't have neighborhoods filled with women in a Valium-induced funk. They were happy women who had tons of kids and had lots of craziness, but there was a real goodness. And but then we had the 60s, and that was a huge spiritual, I'll say revolution, but I take your point. It's not from the masses up. It was from the top down.
Yeah.
So maybe we need an inverted revolution, I'll say.
It was a weakening, to put it mildly, of the spiritual influence.
Yeah.
And that's where the very, very tragic infiltration of the church really got hold.
Okay, we're going to stop right there and take a break, and we'll continue this shortly. Thank you, Kathleen.